Thank you very much. It's great to be here. What I'm going to talk about, it's about creativity as a process. What I really want to talk about is to share with you the idea that creativity is a practice. It's a practice that we can all do better at. And the practice is to help us shift our consciousness. As we all remember the saying by Albert Einstein, we cannot solve the problem using the same consciousness that caused the problem in the first place. So how do we shift that consciousness? And I think shifting that consciousness is what creativity is about. I want to introduce to you a set of tools that we can all practice. We can all practice it every day. I call those tools sustainability tools. I use this word sustainability because I think these are the capabilities of the human potentials that we can all practice. They're all very straightforward, and that they will help to sustain and propel us into a better world, which we all want. Now, I work in a policy think tank, so what I want to do is to show you about creativity and shifting consciousness in the policy process. Now, when we think about policy, we think about politics. What do you think about when you hear the word politics? It's pretty negative, isn't it? It's pretty negative whether you are from the east or the west or the north or the south. The reason I think we have a visceral negativity towards the word politics and thinking about politics is because politics represents confusion. We don't necessarily understand it. It represents contention because people seem to disagree and argue. And then, of course, when they argue a lot, we have open conflict. This is what worries us about politics. But if we were to take politics on a neutral basis, it should be a noble business because it is the business of the people. It is the business that should be done in the public interest. And politics, ultimately, of course, should be about transformation. It should be about change. It is about shifting consciousness. How do we go from where we are to where we want to be? In politics, we need to go through a process, and we need to think about that change, and we need to reduce it down to public policy. In talking about public policy, what I want to introduce to you is the creative side of public policy today. So what I want to do is to give you an example that I think in Hong Kong we may be all able to identify with. Now, my example is Victoria Harbour. You may remember we had a furious many years, decades of filling up the harbour. What I want you to do is just to remind yourself. Oops, sorry. I'll go. Sorry about this. Okay. Focus on the white bits. The white bits is the land, of course. This is Hong Kong Island. This is Kowloon. And that's the original land. Now, this is what you all have today. All these color bits. Don't worry about the color bits and ignore the yellow bits for the time being. All the color bits is what we have filled in. So we do have a smaller harbour. This has been filled in. This has been filled in. This is West Kowloon. Some of these have been filled in. This is being filled in, as you're talking about it, although the size is much smaller. This has been abandoned, and this has been abandoned, and some of this have been greatly reduced. So just think about it. How do we shift the thinking from many decades of reclamation to now government adopting a policy of no reclamation? Because in Hong Kong for many years, our consciousness, our accepted wisdom, our assumption was that we have a lot of people and we have not enough land. So we all believed this. In 1995, when I saw this map was put together by the government. The question I asked was, narrowing the harbour, filling up great tracts of Victoria Harbour, is this a good thing or not? And frankly, I didn't know. I stared at this map, and there was something that told me that maybe this wasn't the way we needed to go. Now, if we go forward, we tried to visualize what those plans meant, and we created this poster. This poster was what won the day. This was what stopped harbour reclamation. And in the end, of course, part of visualization is about shifting consciousness. So, well, I'm afraid this is gone, but this is not going to happen. This is much reduced, and some of those other pieces you saw on the other map is not happening. But just think, the assumption that we need to reclaim the harbour because we have many people and not enough land. The shift in consciousness was actually asking a range of questions and suspending judgment. It's one of the most powerful creativity tools is to suspend your judgment, is to question. If something tells you is not quite right, is to say, is it true? And what we found out was there was actually lots of land in Hong Kong. There was lots of land in the new territories. There was lots of land that was no longer being used. There was lots of buildings, the industrial buildings in Hong Kong, that were no longer being used because our manufacturing industry had gone across the border. But the problem was, somehow we have policies in Hong Kong that found it easier to reclaim the harbour than to use the land that had been freed up from manufacturing. And what we needed in Hong Kong was more commercial land, not industrial land. So that was really the starting point. And you realize that actually to change this, to stop harbour reclamation, the sort of mindset change that has to take place. The government had to stop its plans. Many businesses that have vested interest in continuing harbour reclamation had to see a new picture that actually allowed them to do very much more. And today, of course, you know, we're talking about stopping reclamation, finishing existing projects in Central, not doing any more, and now we're talking about how to bring life to the harbour, how to allow all kinds of activities on our waterfront. So shifting that consciousness is essential. And what I want to share with you now is a sort of process, a number of tools. Now, there is a part, I'm afraid, where you've got to sit in front of your computer or lie down to do it, whatever, you know, like if you like to move around to do it, it's all okay. But we do need to do research. We do need to ask the right question. Asking the right question, it's about shifting consciousness. Because you can choose to ask what questions you want to ask. You can also see this and say, well, actually, we can fill up the harbour. That's another vision. We can actually mechanically do it today. But we're not going to do that. So your shifting in the consciousness gives you an idea of what path you want to follow. Now, I want to say a few words about knowledge. Knowledge is about everything. It's about everything we know, everything that we've done. And of course, if you're talking about one individual, we are by definition limited. So we need to tap into the knowledge that is within all of us. When we look at the harbour, just take that as an example, the kind of knowledge, the kind of diversity that we need to bring together to think about how to stop reclamation, how to use land that is available more efficiently, how to bring the people to the harbour, how to design a harbour front that we all love. To do all that, we need a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience. So we need to bring people together, and we need to bring together everything that we know to shift that consciousness and then to be able to conceptualize it, to articulate it, to bring everybody together, to buy that message, and then to deliver it. Now, I want to say something about learning. We all see, learning, it's that person, right? It's a solitary exercise. But actually, that's not true. Learning, it's about listening, because we don't embody all the knowledge. We need to listen to others. We need to understand. We need to be able to absorb what other people are telling us. And one of the sustainability tools is, in fact, TED Talks, because we need to be able to reduce down how to absorb the information and present information in the shortest possible time. Then we need to be able to communicate. We need to be able to use different ways to communicate to people, to change mindsets, to open up with ideas, and to change our behavior. Well, then we need to harness knowledge. Harnessing knowledge, I believe, it's about communication. Once you have these new ideas, you need to communicate it, and you need to communicate it in many, many different ways. Because the intelligence that is in people, we all have preferred modes of intelligence. Some people like to read, some people like to see, some people like to move around, some people like, music. All different ways can help to change mindset and behavior. And we need to use all of these, even in public policy, which is why you see governments being interested to work with artists, to work with schools, to work with visual artists, to actually help people see that different consciousness. Well, then of course we need to put creativity to good use. What does it really mean? It means putting knowledge to good use to bring all of these things together. So the skills of shifting consciousness through maybe the more boring form of learning how to communicate, to conceptualize, and then to be able to present it out again. These are the simple ideas of different tools we can use in our daily lives to communicate better with other people, in the way that we conduct meetings, whether the meeting is just for 2 people, 4 people, or 300 people, 500 people, town hall meetings where we all need to come together to look at big issues. How we design this, how we communicate, how we take the conflict out of these discussions so that we can shift that consciousness. This is what sustainability tools is about. Thank you for giving me your time.